There's something thrilling about going on a wildlife safari, the raw, untamed beauty of nature, the heart-pounding excitement of seeing wild animals up close. But sometimes that adventure takes a terrifying turn. While safaris are meant to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience, for some unlucky souls they've ended in tragedy. We're talking about terrifying, real-life incidents where people got a little too close to nature's deadliest creatures and paid the ultimate price. From unexpected animal attacks to freak accidents, these are some of the most disturbing deaths to ever happen on a wildlife safari. Buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride.
There are moments in life when courage is tested in ways no one could ever anticipate. For Quinn Swales, a seasoned British safari guide, that moment came in the vast wilderness of Zimbabwe's Hwange National Park. What started as an ordinary dawn safari, a chance for tourists to witness Africa's raw beauty up close, turned into a terrifying fight for survival. The 40-year-old guide was leading a group of tourists on foot, tracking lions through the golden grasslands. The air was still, the morning sun rising over the savannah. Then, in an instant, everything changed. A massive male lion, unpredictable, wild, and ready to strike, charged straight at them. It was an attack no one saw coming. Faced with the unthinkable, Quinn didn't run. He didn't panic. He did what true leaders do. He put himself between danger and those who depended on him. With every ounce of his training, he tried to distract the lion, to divert its lethal rage away from the terrified tourists. But nature is merciless. The beast overpowered him, mauling him to death in front of the group he had sworn to protect. The guests walked away unscathed because of him. His sacrifice wasn't just the act of a guide doing his job, it was the ultimate display of bravery, a final selfless decision to ensure others would live. And yet, the irony of it all cuts deep. The very park where he lost his life had been in the global spotlight just weeks before, when another lion, one known across the world, met his own violent end. Cecil, Hwange's most famous lion, had been illegally hunted by an American dentist in a killing that sparked international outrage. The 13-year-old predator, with his distinctive black mane and commanding presence, had been part of an Oxford University conservation study. But that didn't stop Walter Palmer from paying $50,000 to lure him out of the park's protected zone, shooting him with a bow and arrow, then tracking him for 40 agonizing hours before finally finishing the job with a rifle. Quinn Swales had admired Cecil. A keen photographer himself, he had even used a photo of the legendary lion as his Facebook cover image. And now, in a cruel twist of fate, he had fallen to one of Cecil's kind, another powerful male, acting on pure instinct. His death sent shockwaves through the safari and conservation world. Colleagues, friends, and tourists who had once walked beside him struggled to process the loss. One tribute, raw with grief, spoke of a man who had been living his dream, who had turned his back on a career as a pilot to embrace the wild, to guide others through the very landscapes he loved most. He had always been the one to share knowledge, to make others feel safe in the presence of Africa's most formidable creatures. But on that morning, in that brutal, heart-stopping moment, he was the one who had no escape. And yet, his final act was not of fear, but of heroism. There's an unspoken rule when visiting a wildlife park. Respect the boundaries between you and the animals. But sometimes, curiosity and excitement blur that line. And sometimes, nature reminds us just how thin the glass between life and death really is. It was supposed to be an unforgettable afternoon drive through South Africa's Lion Park. A chance to see the kings and queens of the wild up close. A 22-year-old American tourist and her male companion rolled through the sprawling enclosures, surrounded by lions roaming just meters away. Windows down, cameras ready, they leaned in to capture the perfect shot. Then, in an instant, everything changed. A lioness, her golden frame sleek and powerful, moved closer. At first, she seemed calm, just another magnificent predator blending into the sunlit savannah. But then, with terrifying speed, she lunged, claws scraping against metal, jaws snapping through the open passenger window. There was no time to react, no time to roll up the glass. The beast's massive jaws clamped down, dragging the young woman from her seat, pulling her from the illusion of safety into the brutal reality of the wild. Her companion fought desperately, struggling to pry her from the lion's grip, but it was too late. Park staff rushed to intervene, but by the time they reached the scene, the damage was done. The attack had been swift, merciless. The woman succumbed to her injuries before paramedics could save her. The man survived, wounded but alive. A cruel contrast. One moment they had been side by side, sharing an adventure. The next, she was gone. Authorities launched an investigation, as they always do when the untamed world reminds humanity of its place. She died unnaturally, a police spokesman stated, as if any death by a lion's jaws could ever be anything else. The park, a popular destination known for super close-up animal views, had seen incidents before. Just months earlier, an Australian tourist had been bitten in the leg after lowering his window. A 13-year-old boy had been attacked by a cheetah after sneaking through a fence. Warnings had been issued. Keep the windows up, stay inside the vehicle. But warnings are easy to ignore when the wild seems within reach, until it reaches back. The fate of the lioness remained uncertain. Would she be punished for following her instincts? The park's spokesman hesitated to answer, only offering condolences to the grieving family. But one thing was certain, this was no accident. It was a reminder, a brutal, tragic lesson that in the animal kingdom there is no such thing as a safe distance. There's a fine line between admiration and danger, and in the wild, crossing it can be fatal. In the heart of Zimbabwe's Mana Pools National Park, where the golden sun filters through ancient trees and the rhythmic sounds of nature fill the air, a group of tourists arrived, eager to witness Africa's most majestic creatures up close. They had come for adventure, for the thrill of seeing the untamed world in all its glory. But for one woman, that desire for the perfect photograph became a tragic, irreversible mistake. She had traveled thousands of miles, her excitement building with every mile of dusty road that brought her deeper into the wilderness. This was her dream, to stand in the presence of Africa's giants, to see elephants not behind the bars of a zoo, but roaming freely in the land they had ruled for centuries. When her group entered the park, fate brought them directly to what she had been hoping for, a herd of elephants, their massive frames moving slowly through the sun-baked landscape, their trunks swaying as they grazed. The sight was mesmerizing, almost surreal, but for her, observing from a distance wasn't enough. She wanted to capture the moment, to preserve it in a way that a simple memory never could. With a camera in hand, she made a fateful decision. She stepped out of the vehicle, moving closer to the herd, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and caution. Perhaps she believed she was still at a safe distance. Perhaps she thought the elephants, so often depicted as gentle, wouldn't mind her presence. Then everything changed. A single movement, one that no one could fully understand, set off a chain reaction that would end in horror. One of the elephants, a towering beast of unimaginable strength, suddenly stopped grazing. Its ears flared, its small eyes locked onto her, its massive body tensed. Something had unsettled it, something had pushed it too far. The charge was instant, a thunderous explosion of movement and fury, the air filled with the deep, earth-shaking roar of an elephant in distress, a sound that triggers a primal fear in anyone who hears it. The ground trembled as the massive creature closed the distance in seconds, its trunk raised, tusks gleaming in the sun. There was no time to react, no chance to retreat. A scream ripped through the air, then a sickening impact. The elephant struck with devastating force, knocking her to the ground before its enormous feet came crashing down. The world blurred into chaos, shouts from the other tourists, the pounding of hooves against the earth, the dust rising in thick clouds. When it was over, the silence was even more deafening than the attack itself. Park rangers rushed to the scene, but there was nothing they could do. The woman, once so full of life, so eager for adventure, lay still on the ground. Her injuries were too severe, her body too broken. She succumbed to them before the day was over. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the park, another grim reminder of the consequences of underestimating the wild. Tinashe Farawo, a spokesman for the Zimbabwe Parks and Wildlife Management Authority, spoke cautiously about the incident. No one knew for certain what had triggered the attack. Had it been her sudden movement, the sound of the camera, or was it simply a reminder that even the most peaceful-looking creatures have their limits? But one thing was clear, this was not an isolated incident. For every tragic story, there had been warnings. The rules were always the same. Keep a safe distance, stay in your vehicle. Remember that these are not creatures to be controlled. Yet time and time again, excitement and overconfidence led people to break those rules. And nature, indifferent to human curiosity, responded the only way it knew how. The tourists who had witnessed the attack would never forget what they had seen. The sight of the woman stepping forward, the elephant's sudden shift in demeanor, the devastating speed of the charge. For them, the wilderness would never again be just a place of beauty. It would also be a place of brutal, unforgiving reality. In the animal kingdom, there are no second chances, and for one tourist in Mana Pools, a single moment of awe became the last moment she would ever see. The African wilderness had always called to her. It was the adventure of a lifetime, the grand journey she had promised herself, a final, unforgettable trip before her 80th birthday. But in the heart of Zambia's vast Kafue National Park, where the untamed beauty of nature stretches endlessly, her dream turned into a nightmare. Gail Matson had come to witness the raw majesty of the wild, to feel the pulse of the land beneath her, to see the great creatures of Africa in their natural domain. She had no way of knowing that one of those creatures would bring her story to a tragic end. The safari vehicle rumbled over uneven terrain, carrying its passengers through a landscape teeming with life. The sun painted the sky in shades of amber and gold as the group scanned the horizon, eager for a glimpse of the animals that roamed freely. Then, from the dense brush, movement. A massive bull elephant emerged, its towering form cutting through the foliage like a ghost of ancient times. At first, it was nothing unusual, just another breathtaking moment on an already extraordinary trip. The group watched in awe as the elephant moved with slow, deliberate steps. Cameras were raised, a moment to capture, a memory to keep. But something was wrong. The elephant's posture shifted, its ears flared. A deep, rumbling growl vibrated through the air, a sound that sent an instinctive shudder through anyone who heard it. Then, without warning, it charged. The vehicle came to a sudden halt. There was no time to escape, no route to safety. The elephant was too close, moving with terrifying speed, an unstoppable force of nature. A panicked gasp, a blur of movement, then impact. The massive tusk crashed into the side of the vehicle, sending it lurching violently. Metal groaned under the force. The world flipped upside down as the truck was overturned like a child's toy, rolling onto its side. Shouts filled the air, a chaotic mixture of shock and terror. Dust and debris rained down as the passenger scrambled, dazed and disoriented. And then silence. Gail lay still. The others around her stirred, groaning as they clutched their injuries, but she did not move. She had lived for adventure, but in this moment, adventure had taken her. The aftermath was a blur of frantic efforts. A guide shouting for help, injured passengers being tended to, a call for emergency assistance. But for Gail, there was nothing that could be done. Her journey had ended in the place she had dreamed of, but not in the way she had ever imagined. Her daughter, Rona Wells, would later confirm the unthinkable. Her mother, the woman who had always embraced life with an unbreakable spirit, had died in a tragic accident while living out her dream adventure. The footage of the attack, shared across social media, showed the brutal reality of what had happened. The enormous elephant, its fury unmatched, storming the vehicle and toppling it in mere seconds. The helplessness of those inside. The fragility of human life against the power of the wild. The company that had led the safari wilderness insisted that their guides were among the most experienced, the most well-trained. But on that fateful day, experience was no match for the unpredictability of nature. The terrain had blocked the escape route. There was no way out. It's extremely rare to see an elephant that irate, said Marlon Dutoit, a wildlife photographer and safari guide. Across Africa, thousands of tourists embark on safaris every day without incident, but nature follows its own rule. Gail's body would be returned home to the United States. With the support of local Zambian authorities and the U.S. Embassy, she had set out on what she called her last big trip, expecting to return with stories to tell. Instead, she became part of one. Friends remembered her for her adventurous soul. She told us this was going to be her last big adventure, said John Longaboth, a friend from Arizona. She was about to turn 80. She thought maybe it was time to slow down, but the wild does not slow down for anyone. In the vast landscapes of Africa, where nature reigns supreme, there are no guarantees. Even the most breathtaking journeys can take a turn into the unknown. And for Gail Matson, her final adventure became a haunting reminder of just how powerful and unpredictable the untamed world truly is. The weekend was meant to be a celebration, a gathering of family, love, and milestones. Marika Engelbrecht had returned to a familiar place, a game farm in Limpopo, where the wild stretched endlessly and life moved at nature's rhythm. It was her mother's 50th birthday, a special Mother's Day, and almost impossibly, the first anniversary of her marriage to Juan Engelbrecht. She was 25, young and full of life, with the world ahead of her. No one could have imagined how suddenly, how cruelly it would all be taken away. Early Saturday morning, as the golden African sun cast its first light over the veld, Marika set out on a walk, her two beloved German short-haired pointers, Tasco and Jasha, bounding ahead. They were more than pets to her, they were family. The morning air was crisp, the landscape stretching endlessly before her. A peaceful scene, interrupted only by the distant rustling of leaves and the occasional chirp of birds greeting the new day. Then something changed. One of the dogs, perhaps catching a scent, bolted toward a nearby herd of giraffes. The towering creatures stood gracefully in the distance, their long necks swaying gently as they watched the approaching commotion, among them a mother and her calf. Marika, instinct kicking in, rushed forward calling for her dogs. In an instant, everything unraveled. The mother giraffe, sensing a threat, moved swiftly. There was no hesitation, no warning, just raw instinct. Marika, in a desperate attempt to shield her dog, bent down, scooping up the panicked animal. And then the fatal blow. A single powerful kick struck the back of her neck. The impact was instant, merciless. She never had the chance to scream, never had time to run. Her body crumpled to the earth, lifeless before it even touched the ground. Back at the farmhouse, the family was unaware that their world had just shattered. The first sign came when one of the dogs returned, leash still attached, alone. That moment, when joy turned to dread, would be seared into their memories forever. Something was wrong. Visser, her brother, led the frantic search. They moved through the veld, calling her name, hoping, praying. Then they found her. She was still, untouched by trampling, no visible wounds, just the cruel reality of a life stolen in an instant. Her father, Fritz Visser, stood frozen, absorbing the unspeakable truth. His daughter, who had always felt at home in nature, lay motionless on the land she loved. The trackers later confirmed what had happened. The mother giraffe had defended her calf, acting only out of instinct. There was no malice, no rage, just the unforgiving force of the wild. The giraffe was left undisturbed, spared from any retaliation. Juan Engelbrecht, the man who had married Marika just a year earlier, now faced a world without her. Their future, once so bright, had been reduced to memories in the blink of an eye. The life they had built, the dreams they had shared, gone. She gave her life to protect her dogs, Smith, a family member, would later say. It was a tragic twist of fate. Her love for nature, her devotion to her animals, the very things that defined her, had placed her in harm's way. Marika had touched the lives of so many. Her warmth, her kindness, her love for the outdoors. She left behind not just family, but a world that was better because she had been in it. Her journey would end in Sanin, where she would be laid to rest. But in the whispers of the wind through the veld, in the quiet rustling of the trees she loved so much, a part of her would always remain.